Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are setting up my March wrap-up for 2024, and I was able to read another 26 books this month. It was kind of an odd month because I feel like I didn't read this many books, but somehow I managed to pull it off. So it brings my total to, I think, almost half of my yearly goal, but for my 24 books to read in 2024, I read Court of Wanderers by Rin Chupeco. Just the one, compared to, I think, last month I read 10 of the books on this challenge. But for my reading tracker, the 26 books now brings my total reads for the year up to 76. And I know I'm on pace to potentially read 300 books this year. I do not anticipate that happening because, as I've said in previous videos, the first couple months of the year are always really slow for me. With the weather cold, I don't really do much outside of the house, and so I'm stuck home reading a lot, but as the weather starts to warm, I typically start to go out and do other hobbies that I have, start to go on little weekend trips or vacations and things like that, and so I just get a little bit busier when the weather starts to warm. So I definitely anticipate my reading to kind of taper off a bit as we head into the summer months, but I don't know. I mean, I've been on a roll the last couple months, so we'll kind of see where this goes and how many books I'm actually able to read this year. But like I said, I definitely don't anticipate reading too many than I normally do. For my TBRs, in particular my physical TBR, I was able to read 3 books on this list, including Venko by Sherry Dimeline, and The Dead Take the A Train by Cassandra Khaw and Richard Kadri, and then She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. I think I gave all of these 4 stars, so that was a very nice thing to not only knock off some of my physical TBR, but have them be books that I enjoyed. I can't say the same for my digital TBR. I read How Does It Feel and Forged by Magic. How Does It Feel I did not like at all, but Forged by Magic was a cute little fantasy romance. And then for my arcs, I was able to complete 2 of the arcs that I had in March, and that includes Jump Knots by Hao Jingfang. And my other March arc was A Story Spun in Scarlet by R. Dugan. On to my favorite challenge of the year, which is my ABC challenge. I was able to add 5 books this month, including my C book, Court of Wanderers by Rin Chupeco, my G book, God Killer by Hannah Kaner, Otherworldly for O by F.T. Lukens, Parable of the Sower for P by Octavia E. Butler, and then Venko by Sherry Dimeline. My favorite book this month was Most Ardently by Gabe Cole Navoa. I read this for the Trans Rights Readathon and I absolutely adored it. And then our book club selection this month, our theme is food, and so we needed to pick a book with food as the main subject. So we chose Death by Bubble Tea by Jennifer J. Chow. I know it may not look like it, but not as many anticipated releases for March as the previous 2 months, which I was kind of grateful for because I didn't give myself a whole lot of room to put down that many books, but I was able to acquire some of them that came out in March. But I think April, I'm glad I have a whole dedicated space for April because there are a lot of books that I'm anticipating for next month. And moving on to our final setup, which is all of the books that I read in March. This has become one of my favorite, most satisfying things to do every month with my journal, and that is to put on the pages every book that I read during the month with the little book covers. And I do get asked this question a lot, so I'll just keep letting you all know that what I do is I just grab the book covers from Goodreads, drag it to my desktop, and then I do use Canva to create a collage and just plop the covers in there. And I have a printer here at home, and I just ordered some basically printer paper that is actually sticker paper off Amazon, which I have linked in the description, and I just print it directly onto the sticker paper and then cut out all of the covers, and that's how I'm able to just stick them directly into my journal, which just helps me a lot. Some of the stuff that you see me glue down, I would not want to have to glue down all of these individual covers, so printing these on sticker paper definitely helps. And then of course I have my secret trapdoor yet again that I made in advance, but I just take my flower stickers and some extra pages from other notebooks and just make this little trapdoor, and I print my stats on the same sticker paper. The stats I track in Storygraph, which is an app that you can use to track your reading. And for the month of March, the demographics of the books that I read, they weren't as diverse as I am trying to keep my reading this year, which is split 50-50. But of the 26 books I read, 16 were by Caucasian authors, 5 were by LGBTQIA+ authors. I had 5 of the books I read by API authors, 3 were by Black authors, 1 was by an Indigenous author, and 1 was by a Middle Eastern or Arab author. And then for the genre, 16 is always my top read at 16 books. In the fantasy genre, 6 in the LGBTQIA genre, 6 were in the romance genre as well, while 4 were in the YA genre, 4 mystery books, and then 3 sci-fi books. And then some separate tags that I've been tracking this year on my own. Of the 26 books that I read, 13 I got from the library, 13 I own, 9 of them were ARCs that I received, 4 of them I listened to the audiobook version on an app that I subscribe to called Everand, or formerly Scribed. 2 of them were books that I read through my Kindle Unlimited subscription, and then 1 book was a book I listened to on Spotify. I can usually get at least 1 book a month through the premium subscription that I have on Spotify. So those are just the books that I'm reading, and if I own them and how much I check out from the... So I do utilize my library quite a bit. And then for ratings, the most I had were 4 stars, and I had 13 books with 4 stars. I had 10 books with 3 stars, 2 books with 2 stars, and 1 book this month got a 5-star rating. And then for page number count, 8% of the books I read were over 500 pages, and then 65% were between the 300 and 500 page mark, and then 27% of the books I read were under 300 pages. And then for the format, 69% of the books I read were in audiobook format, and 31% were in digital format. I did not read any actual print books this month. Moving on to the review portion of my setup, I selected another 12 books to share reviews for, and I am doing yet another layout for these. I'm just going to play around with them until I find one that I really like. But first we have Tales of the Celestial Kingdom by Sue Lynn Tan. Sue Lynn Tan's highly acclaimed best-selling Celestial Kingdom duology is expanded with this new compilation of stories from before, during, and after the events in Daughter of the Moon Goddess and Heart of the Sun Warrior, all from the perspectives of beloved characters. I am so enamored by Sue's writing. I know it's not for everyone, but for me it's absolute poetry and evokes such vivid imagery when I read it. While these short stories focus mostly on the longing and love that characters have for one another, it was nice to go back to these stories and get a better sense of our characters' motivations in the events that take place within one of my favorite duologies. I gave it 4 stars. And then we have Venko by Sherry Demaline. This story focuses on Lucky St. James, who is barely hanging on when she discovers she will be evicted from her tiny Toronto apartment. Then, one night, burrowing through a wall, she finds a silver spoon etched with a crooked-nosed witch and a sword and the word Salem humming with otherworldly energy. Lucky is familiar with the magic of her indigenous ancestors, but she has no idea that the spoon links her to Venko's network of witches throughout North America. And if you haven't already figured it out, Venko is just kind of an anagram of coven. This book does feature witches, but the book follows the cross-country journey of Lucky and her snarky grandmother as they help their new coven locate the final spoon that will complete their circle and make their group whole for the first time in centuries. Filled with unique characters, tense scenes, and a plot that once it picks up, never stops, I thoroughly enjoyed this book, my first read by Sherry. I cannot wait to read more of her work. I gave it 4 stars. Next up is a book that has long been on my TBR, and that is Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. Lauren and her family live in one of the only safe neighborhoods remaining on the outskirts of Los Angeles. Behind the walls of their defended enclave, she and a handful of other citizens try to salvage what remains of a culture that has been destroyed by drugs, disease, war, and chronic water shortages. Lauren struggles with hyperempathy, a condition that makes her extraordinarily sensitive to the pain of others. When fire destroys their compound, Lauren's family is killed and she is forced out into the world that is fraught with danger as she begins her journey north towards safety. There really isn't much I can say about this book that hasn't already been said, but the fact that this was written in the early 90s and takes place in 2024 blows my mind. So many things that occur in this book are starting to occur now, and it is impossibly hard not to imagine all of this coming to fruition in our lifetimes. Octavia is truly one of a kind in her storytelling, but I can honestly say I will never read this book again. I've been reading a lot of horror lately, and this is the book that scares me the most, and I gave it 4 stars. Next we have Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This was our book club pick of February, or no, was it March? I can't remember, but our book club read it, and basically Daisy is a girl coming of age in LA in the late 60s, sneaking into clubs on the Sunset Strip, sleeping with rock stars, and dreaming of singing at the Whiskey A Go-Go. By the time she's 20, her voice is getting noticed, and she has the kind of heedless beauty that makes people do crazy things. Also getting noticed is the Six, a band led by the brooding Billy Dunn. Daisy and Billy cross paths when a producer realizes that the key to supercharged success is to put the two together. What happens next will become the stuff of legend, written as an oral history of one of the biggest bands of the 70s. There's nothing original about this story, to be honest. It takes inspiration from real people and real events, but it's the way Jenkins Reid manages to just utterly ensnare you to the point where all you think about is her book and seeing what happens to these characters. It's hard to describe, but I've experienced this with other books of hers I've read. It also helped that I read this on audiobook and is performed by an amazing cast that includes Benjamin Bratt and Judy Greer. So if you do want to read this book, I highly recommend that you get your hands on the audiobook version that is specifically performed by a full cast. That definitely cranked this story up a notch, because as I said, the story, it's not really that original. It's just about rockers in the 70s getting drunk and stoned and, having affairs and lots of sex. But when you listen to it on that audiobook version, it's very immersive and very enjoyable. So I gave this book 4 stars. Next up is an ARC that I received with The Weavers of Alamaxa by Hader Elsbai. This is the sequel to The Daughters of Izdahar, and to be honest, I didn't really like the first book that much. There were some things about the characters that I found disagreeable, but when I received an advance copy of this, I was like, okay, I'll give it another shot. It is the end of this duology, but basically, the Daughters of Izdahar, a group of women fighting for the vote and against the patriarchal rule of Parliament, have finally made strides in having their voices heard, only to find them drowned out by the cannons of the fundamentalist Ziranis. As long as Alamaxa continues to allow for the elemental magic of the Weavers, Zirani will stop at nothing to end what they perceive is a threat to not only their way of life, but the entire world. I found myself pleasantly surprised by the evolution of this series. The second installment in this YA duology succeeded in expanding the world, deepening the character development, and raising the stakes to satisfying heights while tying up loose ends. The character development in particular presented a surprising twist in the form of our 2 leads. Nahal underwent a compelling transformation in this installment. Her growth was palpable, and I found myself rooting for her as she navigated the challenges before her. However, it was the other character, Georgina's character, who I felt somewhat regressed in her character development as she grappled with insecurities and uncertainty, but I still, at the end of the day, really liked this sequel, and so I highly recommend this Egyptian historical fantasy-inspired novel about women fighting for their right to vote and basically women's suffrage, but with some elemental magic thrown in to the mix. I gave this 4 stars. Next up is The Crane Husband by Kelly Barnhill. In this stunning contemporary retelling of the Crane wife, a 15-year-old teenager is the backbone of her small Midwestern family, budgeting the household finances and raising her younger brother, while her mom, a talented artist, weaves beautiful tapestries. For 6 years, it's been just the three of them. Her mom has brought home guests at times, but none have ever stayed. Yet, when her mom brings home a 6-foot-tall crane with a menacing air, the girl is powerless to prevent her mom letting the intruder into her heart and her children's lives. Utterly enchanted and numb to his sharp edges, her mom abandons the world around her to weave the masterpiece the crane demands. There is nothing happy, romantic, cute, or loving about this book. This novella really manages to pack a punch in such a short amount of time, and Barnhill really excels at telling a lot within so little. It was truly heartbreaking, to be honest, but I still gave it 4 stars. Next is one of my favorite reads of the month, Where the Dark Stands Still by A.B. Poranek. This came out this year, and it definitely gives off Howl's Moving Castle vibes, but basically raised in a small village near the Spirit Wood, Liska Rodast knows that magic is monstrous and its practitioners are monsters. After Liska unleashes her own powers with devastating consequences, she is caught by the demon warden of the wood, the Leshy, who offers her a bargain: 1 year of servitude in exchange for a wish. Whisked away to his crumbling manor, Liska soon discovers the sinister roots of their bargain, and if she wants to survive the year and return home, she must unravel her host's spool of secrets and face the ghosts of his past. Like I said, this definitely had some strong Howl's Moving Castle vibes with a bit of Spirited Away sprinkled in, but I absolutely loved it. I'm really digging the theme of FMCs who have magic that got out of hand due to constant suppression, and all they need is a guiding hand when it comes to controlling it, usually in the form of a handsome man with recluse tendencies, but the supporting cast in this were equally enjoyable, and that ending, oh my gosh, I gave this 4 stars. And then we have Flower Heart by Catherine Bakewell. Clara's magic has always been wild, but it's never been dangerous. Then a simple touch causes poisonous flowers to bloom in her father's chest. The only way to heal him is to cast an extremely difficult spell that requires perfect control. And the only person willing to help her is her former best friend Xavier, who's grown from a sweet, shy child into someone distant and mysterious. Xavier asks a terrible price in return, knowing Clara will give anything to save her father. See, you can see a theme here with girls who have uncontrollable magic and just need a guiding hand. Flower Heart has been on my Cozy Fantasy TBR for far too long. Overall, I enjoyed this quick YA read and liked the dynamic between our two leads. This is primarily a character-driven story with very little in terms of plot and world building, but I went into this expecting those things to be minimal. Clara is a very determined lead, and while Xavier definitely had a tragic backstory, you don't get to know him until the latter half of the story, but still worth checking out. I give it 4 stars. And finally, we have all of the books that I read for this year's Trans Rights Readathon. I read 4 books. 2 of them were arcs, and 2 of them were just books that I really wanted to read. Starting with my arcs, there's Otherworldly by F.T. Lukens. This story follows Ellery, a skeptic thrust into a world of magic and mystery when they encounter Nox, a supernatural being seeking to make a crossroads deal. As they navigate the intricacies of their unlikely partnership, sparks fly and a tender romance blossoms amidst the chaos. The premise of Otherworldly is undeniably engaging, offering a fresh take on the familiar trope of a human and supernatural being forming an unlikely bond. The crossroads deal adds an element of suspense and urgency to the story, propelling the plot forward with each twist and turn. Told from the alternating perspectives of Ellery and Nox, the novel shines brightest when focusing on the latter. Nox emerges as a vibrant and charismatic character, brimming with energy and optimism. His journey of self-discovery and longing to experience humanity is both heartwarming and compelling, and drew me into his world with ease. I absolutely adored his character, and I enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars. Then we have one of my books from my 24 books to read in 2024. If you have followed me on this channel for a while, then you know the first book in this duology, Silver Under Nightfall, was one of my favorite books of last year. I absolutely loved it and cannot stop recommending it. It is the perfect dark fantasy, poly romance, vampire fantasy, and yeah, I just can't get enough of it. So I was really excited to get to this sequel, but unfortunately, my expectations may have been a little high. We still follow Remy and his royal vampire companions as they return to face an enemy that is terrifyingly close to home in this queer, bloody, gothic epic fantasy series. Posing as Malik and Zayadin's human familiar, Remy contends with Aluria's intimidating vampire courts and a series of gruesome murders with their help. And more as the three navigate their relationship. But those feelings and even their extraordinary collective strength will be put to the test as each of them unleashes new powers in combat at what may be proven to be the ultimate cost. As a fervent admirer of Civil Under Nightfall, I entered this eagerly anticipated conclusion to this duology with high hopes and bated breath. However, my enthusiasm quickly waned as I encountered a narrative fraught with pacing issues, a disproportionate focus on plot and politics, and an abundance of inconsistencies that detracted from the overall enjoyment of the book. I think one thing that really could have made this book more enjoyable was multiple points of view rather than just Remy's point of view, because with so much focused on the political aspect, especially within the vampire courts, I think it would have been nice to have points of view from the actual vampires in the story. But I gave it 3 stars, and still highly recommend Silver Under Nightfall. Moving on to one of my physical TBR books is The Dead Take the A Train. As I mentioned before, I'm really into horror lately, and Cassandra Khaw is one of my favorite horror authors, so when this book came out last year, I made it a top priority to get to it as soon as possible. But this book follows Julie Cruz, who is a coked up, burnt out 30-something who packs a lot of magic into her small body. She's been trying to establish herself in the NYC magic scene, and she'll work the most gruesome gigs to claw her way to the top. Julie is desperate for a quick career boost to break the dead-end grind, but her pleas draw the attention of an eldritch god who is hungry for revenge. Her power grab sets off a deadly chain of events that puts her closest friends and the entire world directly in the path of annihilation. My love for horror continues to grow with another Cassandra Khaw gem. There's just something so engrossing with a story that features such flawed characters, and while some deserve the gruesome ends they met at the hands of the celestial monstrosities we encounter throughout the book, it says a lot to Khaw and Kadri's writing when all I want is a happily ever after for our drug-addled main character who seems to cause chaos wherever she goes. I gave this 4 stars. And last but certainly not least is my favorite book of the month, Most Ardently, by Gabe Cole-Novoa. This is about a trans boy who searches for a future and a romance in which he can live and love openly as himself in this heartwarming young adult reimagining of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. Oliver Bennett is tired of pretending to be someone he's not, trying to fit into the petticoats his mother stuffs him into for various balls, as well as the expectations society places on him and the docile quote-unquote wife he's expected to become. That is until he meets the ever-sulking Darcy, where they strike up an unlikely friendship and later a heartwarming romance. Even in 1800s England, Oliver's journey as a trans man is one that modern readers can easily recognize, and this retelling of a beloved classic has insanely sweet and ardently adorable. Fans of the original story will surely love this reimagining of a boy willing to risk it all for a slim chance at freedom, love, and a life that can be truly his own. I gave it 5 stars. But the moment you have all been waiting for, here is my full March 2024 reading wrap-up. As always, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button so that you never miss any of my upcoming videos. For all of the books that are included in my challenges, those are also listed below, as well as the supplies that I use. But until next time, everyone, happy reading!